Hello, everyone. I'm Declan McClintock, and this is a lecture on soft skills. First, what are soft skills? Generally, soft skills are any non-technical skill. This includes things such as leadership, communication, teamwork, and so on. And soft skills are very important. So what makes soft skills important? Well, soft skills transfer from job to job regardless of the technical skills required. They make you more marketable for jobs. You'll get asked a lot of soft skills questions in interviews. And having good soft skills also helps you deal with difficult situations, such as diffusing tense arguments in social situations. What else am I going to talk about? Pretty much everything I can. Teamwork and leadership from different perspectives, a lot of advice and experiences that don't categorize particularly well, and there will be a lot of overlap in much of what we discussed today. But the general outline will be teamwork from the perspective of being a team member, then leadership from the perspective of leading a team, and then some other advice. Okay, teamwork time. What are all the times you are on a team? I want you to think about this and keep it in mind while we talk about teamwork, and I'll give you my answer to this. You are always on a team. If you're working on your own, you are a team of one. It's just you. When you're working with others, you'll have more teammates, but it is important to remember that you are a teammate on that team just as much as everyone else. Now, as a team member on a team, you need to make sure you are properly communicating with your team. One of the things you need to communicate is your wants. No one is going to voice the opinions or concerns in your head but you. So, you should be clearly communicating your long-term goals and how the current project relates to those, what your skill set is, what you would like to do on the project, anything that may hamper your progress or is hampering your progress, what you would like to avoid doing or dealing with, and really any other information you can think of. The better your team knows and understands you, the easier it is to work with you. Related to this, you should also listen to your teammates' wants. Good communication skills are not just the talking part. The listening part is also essential. It is very beneficial for you to know what your other team members expect from the project and from you. Listening also allows you to better assess and aid their progress throughout the project. If you know what their goals are, you might be able to mentor them or point them in a productive direction. So, pulling this all together, you should be constantly communicating with your team and paying attention to your team's communications. This allows issues to be properly ironed out quickly as they occur, rather than festering into large issues later in the project. This, of course, also prevents a lot of drama within the team. Communicating, listening for understanding, and working out differences is an essential part to teamwork and relationship building, so you should make sure you are doing what you can now to become an effective communicator. Okay. Let's talk about leadership now from the perspective of a team lead. Now think about when you have taken on a leadership role. If you haven't taken on a leadership role yet, that's okay. I'll throw in some of my own examples as we walk through this. If you have taken on a leadership role before, I want you to think about that role and your experience in that role as we go through this discussion. First, becoming a leader. How do you end up in a leadership position? Sometimes it just happens. If you have the most relevant skill set on a team, or even just the most respect, you can become the leader by default. For my example of this, I was in Boy Scouts as the acting assistant senior patrol leader for summer camp, but a lot of the younger scouts came to me with all their problems instead of the actual senior patrol leader. I guess I was just more approachable, but my point is that sometimes you just end up with the leadership responsibilities without a formal assignment to them. And sometimes leadership is sought out. Some people really want to be in leadership positions, and hopefully they want the position because they know they can do a good job or are passionate about it. Although I've certainly seen many times where people are seeking out leadership positions mostly to have more power and not necessarily to do a good job. Generally, everyone should gather leadership skills, not just the title holders or the people who want a job that obviously involves leadership. Most interviews will have at least one question in them that asks you about leadership in some way. So having some good experience leading is always beneficial. Okay, let's talk about the aspects of leadership. There are a lot of different things that go into being a leader, and these aspects can be broken down in a lot of ways. And we might not cover every single aspect here, but our discussion should help give you a better understanding of leadership roles. Firstly, as a leader, you will have people, and I'm using the word people on purpose here. Your team is comprised of people, including you, of course. They are not minions or underlings. They are people, and it is very important for you to treat them as people. This means you need to understand people, which can be a difficult problem. Because people are from many differing backgrounds, and people have different cultures and experiences, and what one person might find reasonable or funny, another might find appalling. As a leader, you want to understand the people you are leading across all these things. You should be talking to them and trying your best to understand their backgrounds, cultures, and experiences. You want to do this because then you can better resolve interpersonal issues as they arise, or even stop them before they arise by distributing the diverse understanding across your team. Now, to get to the point where you can adequately understand the diverse backgrounds of your team, you're going to need your team to talk to you, which means you need them to be comfortable talking to you, which in turn means you also need to help them understand you. You should remember you are also still a person with a unique background, culture, and set of experiences. You should be able to open up about things and be relatable in conversations. You want to build a relationship with the people you lead and not be an emotionless robot or a scary overlord. Okay, I've kind of already alluded to this, but as a leader, you have a great responsibility for keeping your team tightly knit. You need to be the glue that holds things together. Now, it is worth noting that your other team members can also be glue and should try to be, but many won't want to, and you shouldn't be forcing this role onto someone else. So you, as the leader, can take your understanding of your team and bridge the gaps between your teammates. In doing this, you're going to have to make compromises, difficult decisions, and have an uncomfortable conversation from time to time. But the more you do these things, the easier they will become to handle, and the better a leader you will be. That leads me into our discussion on compromising and bridging gaps. Again, as the leader, you have to sort out the conflicts between your teammates. They will not magically resolve themselves. And the longer you leave something unresolved, the worse it becomes. You should keep in mind, though, that the best answer is usually not obvious. You will need to spend some time with all parties involved in order to get at the root of the problem and fully understand it. You might think that one member is not pulling their weight and maybe needs discipline, but there may be external factors at play, and you should seek to find them and help resolve them. In the case of disagreements between teammates, you should also consider the fact that every social situation is different. Someone might be comfortable talking things out with you and the other teammate involved, or they might not, in which case you might be able to talk to the two team members individually first before you try to get them to talk to and understand each other. Okay, let's talk about making difficult decisions now. I've already mentioned resolving conflicts, and I think you all get the idea now that this is a difficult problem to approach, but is something successful leaders do well, and you will have to become good at it. Another set of difficult decisions you'll have to make are development decisions. When you make development decisions, it is important that you take the time to discuss the decision with all parties affected by it. There are two main reasons for doing this. First, they may have better ideas than you, and you should ask for their input. Secondly, they are very likely to be unhappy if you make a decision that affects them without consulting with them first. I've been on the receiving end of the second reason and seen it happen. Oftentimes, it has an extremely demoralizing and sometimes infuriating effect. When making decisions, you should make sure to weigh all your options. Sometimes the immediate option or obvious solution is not the best. You can create graphs and charts to help you weigh the pros and cons of larger decisions. Once you are ready to make a final decision, you need to make sure you clearly communicate why the decision was made and what the decision means for all parties involved. For small teams, everyone should be around when large decisions are finalized. Now, let's move on to planning and management. As a leader, you have to do a lot of planning and management tasks. I should point out that management is a job. Good management and planning takes a lot of effort and time. Conversely, bad management takes very little. But a well-crafted plan improves your team's efficiency and gives clear goals to be worked towards, as well as metrics to judge progress by. Now, you might be thinking, how do I make good plans for other disciplines I'm unfamiliar with? Let's imagine you're in a leadership position over an entire development team, but your background was in programming. Well, you can have sub-leads handling the other disciplines for you, or if your team is too small for that, you can talk directly with people in the discipline and get from them an understanding of their work. Good management requires you to outline project-long plans, keeping in mind that those plans should be flexible to dramatic changes, especially the further out the plan goes. No project plan survives contact with the realities of development. You should keep these project-long plans updated with any changes that occur over the project timeline. You also need to communicate the plans to your team and make sure they are reasonably achievable and fit your team's expectations. Okay, now we are going to go through some other advice. A varied assortment of lessons learned are advice I've received over the years. The first piece of advice I'm going to give you is a distinction between self-satisfaction and pride. Too much pride is a bad thing. If you've read Oedipus Rex for an English class at some point, pride is a theme in the story, and it causes one person to die and another to gouge out their own eyes. But you've probably gotten the advice to take pride in your work, so I want to make a distinction between being satisfied with your work and being prideful about it. Self-satisfaction I would define as being happy with what you created or were able to do given the context surrounding that accomplishment. When you are self-satisfied with your work, you are still able to see how it could be improved. You can still be critical of it. Pride, on the other hand, I would define as being so full of yourself that you do not recognize the flaws in your work or in yourself. You are blinded by your pride and so will not be able to improve. Why do I make this distinction? Well, it is still important to be happy with yourself and your work, so you won't give up on it. But you also need to recognize that you can get better. If you cannot do that, you will never improve. Personally, I like to say I'm happy with what I accomplished yesterday, but I wouldn't be happy if I did it the same way today. Next piece of advice: experience versus understanding. You've probably heard the cliche, never argue with a fool, they will drag you down and beat you with experience. This basically means experience and understanding don't always go together. For example, I might have 10 years of experience hammering nails, but I've been doing it with the curved side of the hammer. You might try to tell me there's a better way, but I have 10 years of experience, so I must clearly understand how to use a hammer better than you do. My point here, however, is not that you should ignore experienced people. I might be using the wrong side of the hammer, but I probably know the best way to use the wrong side of the hammer to hit nails. My point is that if you are an experienced person, you should never ignore the ideas of those less experienced. They are coming at the problem with fresh eyes and may see more than you. Now for the flip side of this. Never argue with someone who thinks they understand everything. They aren't going to listen to you. We've all met the people who think they are always right and don't take any input from anyone else. You really do not want to be that person. So one thing you should consider is that if something is being done a certain way, there is likely a reason for that. You should try to figure out what that reason is before arguing for a better way. You don't want to risk looking ignorant and offending people. And these people could be experienced people who you really don't want to offend, like someone that could hire you. Next piece of advice, presentation. Most of us probably hate that this is still true, but it is a fact that appearances matter. So keep yourself clean and dress accordingly. If you're going to something and don't know what the right attire is, just ask someone and find out. Also, show as much confidence as you can, even when facing difficult problems. Don't fake it or lie, just show confidence in what you are capable of doing. Avoid being argumentative. Having arguments spoils relationships. I don't mean to say you should be agreeable to everything or never have your own opinions. I mean that you should try to have conversations about topics instead of arguments. One great way to avoid arguments is to respond to things with okay. It's not a yes or a no, which helps avoid getting into arguments while still having a meaningful conversation. It works as a quick acknowledgement that you are listening and seeking to understand as well. Now, some advice on faking it. Fake it till you make it can turn into fake it till you break it. Faking a skill set you don't have rarely turns out well, as it can make you come off as a liar. Fake it till you make it works for building confidence in public speaking, but it doesn't work out for everything. You should remember that I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. It shows honesty, it lets people get you the resources you need to succeed, and almost no one is going to judge you for it. And the people who will don't really matter. These next two slides are about self-evaluation and self-motivation. Self-evaluation means asking questions about yourself, observing your own behavior, and then evaluating the answers to those questions and observations about yourself. Doing this lets you realize where and how you can improve yourself. You should make sure that you evaluate instead of judge. You want to walk the middle ground of logical assessment. You shouldn't beat yourself up or overinflate your own ego. The reason you want to do this self-evaluation is so that you can self-motivate. Once you've asked yourself some questions and observed your own behavior, you should examine the answers and observations in relation to your values and goals. Do they line up with each other? This, of course, requires you to determine what your values and goals are. Once you know what they are, you can use this understanding of your values and goals to motivate your actions. You can use cognitive dissonance now for your own gain. If something you are doing doesn't fit with your own values and goals, the natural question is then, why am I doing it? This makes it much easier to change. You will also have to evaluate and motivate others. Along the same vein, you should ask questions about your teammates and observe your team's behavior. Then evaluate the answers to those questions and observations of your team, and again be sure to evaluate and not judge. Doing this will help you figure out your teammates' goals and align the project and work as much as possible with them. Okay, last piece of advice. Stay calm. The decisions you make when you are calm and collected will be better than those when you are at a high point of emotion, such as anger. This applies to decisions made as a team leader, a team member, and more generally in other aspects of life. That's all for the soft skills lecture.